Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Titania by Rudiger Dorn. This is a 2 to 4 player board game that takes around 45 minutes to an hour to play on average. Now before I get started on my review of Titania, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so I've just finished a 2-player game of Titania here, and this is what the board is going to look like. But bear in mind that, again, at the start of the game, only the middle 3 hexes here will actually have ships in them. So you can see we have spread here quite a lot, and a lot of things have changed. Now, what you're essentially trying to do is you are trying to get points by playing these ships. Now, these ships are not assigned to a certain player. Each player has control over each of the 3 colours, the yellow, red, and blue. And what you're doing is you're playing these cards from your hand, one at a time. You can play up to 3 of these on your go. And whenever you play a card, you have to consider certain things. So number 1, in order to spread into a new hex, you need to have the same coloured ship in an adjacent hex. So for example, if I played this yellow card now, I could maybe spread this yellow run here into this new hex like so, and you'd gain the reward on the hex. We can talk about what all they do shortly. Each hex can only ever keep 2 ships there, and they have to be of different colours. So again, you have to spread out from where there already is a ship. You can have 2 ships in a hex, and those 2 ships have to be different colours. Now, as I said, after each card you play, you will do your action on the map, and we'll talk about what they do shortly. But the more cards you play, the fewer cards that you draw at the end of your turn. And you always do this up to a factor of 3. So if I played 1 card, I would draw 2 cards from the deck. If I played 2 cards, I would draw 1. If I played 3 cards, I would draw 0 cards. And alternatively, I could play no cards and draw 3 from the deck. So again, you're always adding up your card plays up to a total value of 3, either playing or drawing those cards. So what you're essentially trying to do is that you are spreading out, you are revealing these tokens here if they are face down. You know, the first time you go onto them, they'll be flipped face up, and they will give you a number of different types of rewards, such as these shells. The shells come in, I think it's 4 different colours here. Now you're going to collect those shells in front of you, ready to be used to build these towers. So you can see here that this black tower here has been fully built because they can go up to level 3. And you can build these towers as soon as you venture on to one of these kind of rigs here, one of these cranes. So for example, if I played a blue card, moved on to this hex, I'll then have the option to contribute to these towers. Now the first level of a tower will cost you 1 shell of that colour. So the first level will cost me 1 black shell, then the second one will be 2, third one will be 3, and the fourth one will be 4. So in one action, you can actually build a whole tower for 10 shells, because you can build as many as you can afford. And that even applies to the different colours. So you can see here, on this hex, there's 2 different coloured towers, and I can, as long as I can afford it, I can build as many as possible. Now, for each layer you build, you'll get 3 points. So again, a total tower would get you 12 points, but there is a way to boost that by playing these starfish. Now, when you play these starfish, or the way to play these starfish is you will immediately get the chance to cash in your starfish as soon as you venture on and collect a new starfish like so. So if I played a yellow card here, I'll pick up a starfish, and then I could cash in a number of starfish equal to the number of towers printed on a particular hex. So, you know, for example, if I wanted to go here, I could spend 2 starfish like so, because there's 2 towers printed on that hex, and then I'd get a point for not only the towers on the hex itself, but also for each layer or level built. So in this particular hex, that would give me 8 points. Again, 1 for the picture and 1 each for each of the layers there. And as soon as you build that, or cash in those starfish and get your points, you'll place a starfish on there to show that a starfish has already been used on that hex. And from then on, every new level built on that tower will get you 4 points rather than the standard 3. So let's take a look at some of the other awards here. So we've already talked about the starfish, the shells. Sometimes we'll give the tokens will give you a wild shell of your choice, but they have to be the same. And that can even apply to 3 shells at a time. You can get these kind of boosting tokens like this, where as soon as you reveal them, you can place another boat of your choice to push on further. There are pre-printed bonuses on the board, such as getting points or drawing more cards. And there are even these points tokens where you're going to take one of these tokens at random here. And these are all going to be worth between 3 and 5 points for endgame scoring. And that is essentially how the game works. The game is going to be broken down into 2 very distinct rounds. The first round will end as soon as one of the 3 colours of ships has been depleted from the supply. And then what you're going to do is you're going to remove pretty much everything from the board except for the towers that have been built and except for the 6 starting ships in the centre of the board. So yeah, everything else will be removed. Then you'll go again for another round with a few more ships in the supply. And at the end of the game, you'll tally up all the points you've got during the game, and you'll add up the points you've got at the end of the game here through these tokens you've collected. And then the winner will be the player with the most victory points. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Titania. Now, this game actually reminds me of one of those classic Knizia games such as Through the Desert or Blue Lagoon and Babylonia. These kind of route building games where you're always venturing into new land and collecting bonuses as you go. But this one, you are more restricted because you cannot go where you want. You are limited by your hand of cards. And this is cool because some of these cards are wild and will have 2 colours on them. But there are so many things you need to consider because you have the option to play 3 cards per round, but the more cards you play, it means the fewer cards you're going to draw for your next turn. So it really is a balancing act and it's all about seizing the opportunity what's on the board. And this is one of those games where whatever you do, you are going to be laying something on the plate of your opponent. And it's about being really careful about the opportunities you not only leave for yourself and, take for yourself, but also the ones you leave to your opponent, because you don't want to be venturing into a new piece of land. You know that your opponent has a bunch of shells that link to a certain tower. They suddenly go to where you've just played and then they cash in a whole bunch of those shells and get a whole ton of points. So it really is a matter of kind of assessing the board at all times, citing something that can be capitalized on and not letting your opponent do so. But again, it all ties back to how you are managing your cards. When is the time to push forward? Maybe play those 3 cards and get loads of points. Sacrifice your next turn to draw back up to three cards. And when is the time to kind of sit back, not do anything, replenish your hand and reassess your options. I do like this route building element to the game because you have the 3 colours here, and again that ties to the cards in your hand. It can create some pretty interesting kind of dynamics on the board here, because basically you can do a bit of a deep dive with a certain colour. Like you can see here, the red has really ventured to the extremities of the board and got some really nice rewards there. But that does mean that the reds are going to be a bit more valuable because there's going to be more on the board, so therefore there's going to be fewer cards in the deck. But it does mean that you are very restricted to the red and red alone, because again, you can only spawn off to where there is a ship of the same colour adjacent. So I can't just start spanning off from where the red is here with another colour. So again, you either kind of do a deep dive with a specific colour, or you can kind of have more of a flexible approach by equally spreading the 3 different colours there. I do think it's pretty interesting how these towers are built, because of course the first and second level of those towers are so affordable, only costing 1 and 2 shells respectively, and that's a great return on points because again you're going to get 3 points per level you build, or even 4 points if you've already built one of these shells there, or starfish, sorry. But sometimes going for that 3rd and 4th level is worth it, even though it is very expensive, because you're not sure if you are actually going to venture in to these further parts of the board to get that same colour again. Yeah, the return on investment is going to be much better by, again, only having to spend these 1 or 2 shells to build the first couple of levels. But again, are you going to get there in the first place? Who knows? And are you going to be wasting the opportunity or wasting the turns you've already taken to collect those shells? So it's a really good trade-off there. Are you going to spread yourself thinner and try to claim all these bottom levels, or are you going to kind of maybe stock up on your shells and build all 4 levels at once? There's also quite an interesting dynamic about how that relates and synergizes with the starfish action, because you can either kind of trade in your starfish before a tower is even built, knowing the fact that you're going to go there on your next turn maybe, and then have all the shells ready for you and get 4 points per level. But in contrast to that, there is quite an interesting technique you can do where if somebody, say, spams a bunch of shells, builds loads of towers at once like this, and then on your turn, bearing in mind your opponent might not have had a starfish or as many starfish as they needed, you can cash your starfish in and get a whole ton of points with pretty much little effort, because you're going to get a point for each level of that tower built and each tower on the board. So again, a nice little polarizing mechanism there. What are you going to do? But again, it all comes with that risk and reward. Now, from a decision space and from a mechanical standpoint, I think the game is rock solid. There's some good decisions to be made here, and I find it very engaging. But talking of engagement, I do have one issue with it, and that is the fact that halfway through the game, you are doing a hard reset. You know, you're pretty much taking everything off the board and starting again, which really does break the flow, and it kind of feels a bit of a downer where you just think, you know, I'm really getting into this, and then all of a sudden I have to kind of start again. So it would have been nicer if the board state and the mathematics behind the design would have been tailored towards having, one round of the game. You just keep playing until one of the colours of ships has run out. Now, I don't really see why that can't be house ruled. You probably could do that, but obviously that's not what the designer intended. But yeah, that for me, maybe you lose a little bit of engagement with it, but it's not a huge issue, just something that I thought was a little bit jarring at times. I think the game scales pretty well and it plays remarkably well at 2 players, because this game is borderline abstract. You know, you can see at a glance what the opportunities are available to you, and if you are playing with 2 players, you can kind of understand what your opponent might do. Your opponent knows what you want to do, and it becomes a little bit more cerebral. Whereas in the 3 or 4 player versions of the game, it's still really enjoyable, and of course you have to weigh up those opportunities you are not only getting but giving away. It does become a little bit more chaotic, and it's going to be a bit more difficult to plan your turns ahead. But it all depends on what the kind of mode you want to play on. So again, if you really want that tense head-to-head kind of competition, then this is a really good one to look at if you do play with 2 players. The production for the game is decent. The board itself looks a bit murky and muddy and isn't really distinct, but I see that's the kind of aesthetic they're going for. The boats themselves are nice. These are your traditional wooden Euro boats. The board does become a little bit cluttered, as you can see here, but I suppose because it develops as you play, it's not as overwhelming as if you just jump straight in. The cards themselves are nice and clear. You can see at a glance what all the colours are. But speaking of the colours, I do have a few issues when it comes to the kind of colourblind nature of this, because 2 of the colours, for me at least, look almost identical. The browns and the greens are very hard to differentiate. And that applies to the shells as well. So yeah, a few issues there in terms of the colour blindness, but generally I'm happy with it. The tokens are fine. These stack okay. They're a little bit fiddly and you can knock them over, but it's no big issue there. So yeah, production generally decent. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Titania. Now, I'm aware this game isn't one that most board gamers are seeking. It's one of those games that's faded into obscurity, but because of the designer being Rudiger Dorn, I wanted to try it because I'm always intrigued about what he puts out, and his games are always so vastly different, and I'm really glad I did play this one and I have got it in my collection because I get a lot of enjoyment from it. I think it strikes a really nice balance between being thinky and not brain dead, but at the same time not being too stuffy to the point where it's purely abstract, because you do have the randomness of the tokens you're going to get. You've got the randomness of the point tokens you're going to get here, of course the card draws, but still you are probably going to win the game if you are the better player. And again, it's always about trying to assess the board and seek those opportunities. There's some good decisions about how to manage the cards in your hand. When is the time to push? When should I hold on to things? I don't want to hold too long because there's always that timer ticking down in terms of these boats being placed on the board, and the game can end at any times. And I do like that tempo because it seems like sometimes some games you play, it'll be over pretty rapidly because you just so happen to be playing a bunch of the same type of ship. And then sometimes it's a bit more well-rounded and you probably get more done. But yeah, overall, I'm actually really happy with it. I think it's interesting, and if you do like those kind of old school route building Knizia games, then this is definitely one to look at because it's similar but different enough. So yeah, I think I can give this one a recommendation with confidence. It's probably going to be pretty readily available out there on the second-hand market. Again, if the game does interest you or intrigue you, then I recommend you give it a look.